Hi, I'm Dr. Ingrid Clayton. I'm a clinical psychologist, a trauma therapist, and a trauma survivor. And today I want to talk about what is self-gaslighting. So many of us have heard of gaslighting. In fact, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, just named gaslighting as the word of the year for 2022. Gaslighting is having a bit of a moment in terms of a consciousness raising, which I'm really grateful about. And gaslighting is intentional manipulation and minimization designed to make someone question their reality. We also don't want to be throwing the term around too casually. Like if someone has a difference of opinion on something, doesn't necessarily mean they're gaslighting. If someone even is lying to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gaslighting you. It's a systematic, intentional manipulation. It's often used with emotional abuse, psychological abuse, narcissistic abuse. It's a common tactic. So what we can experience as survivors of gaslighting is that we actually start to gaslight ourselves. In my experience, what that sounded like and what it felt like is I always knew what happened to me on some level in my childhood was wrong. But I was being told, Ingrid, you're just being ridiculous. You're being so selfish. I believe that you believe that these things are happening to you, but I don't really believe that they're happening. And so the truth is, gaslighting is effective. Emotional abuse is effective, in part because we are hardwired for relationships. And as children in particular, we literally need our caregivers to survive, right? As a species, we more than most need our caregivers to take care of us and support us for a very long time before we can be independent. And so we are wired to kind of understand ourselves and the world through relationship, through connection. So when that relationship and connection is literally telling you you're bad, you're the problem, you're too sensitive, even that you're making this all up, it has an impact. And so for me, the self-gaslighting sounded like maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you are exaggerating just a bit. You know what? You have so much more sort of resource and tools now. Like, you just really need to let that go. So I kind of pick up the mantle of where the gaslighter left off and continue to carry it on myself. And what that does is minimize my experience. In fact, I go to minimization before I allow myself to really even feel my feelings or own my experiences at all. And this can be a sign, a red flag, that you're kind of cutting yourself off at the knees or you're experiencing your own level of self-gaslighting. If before you even have an opportunity to get upset or frustrated or feel the real feelings that your body wants to express, you're finding a way to package them and minimize them and tuck them away. Our bodies are designed to feel and process and experience our feelings. It's a really important way that we metabolize the world, that we can grow and change. It's a huge piece. We're not just these walking, intellects analyzing, sort of figuring out what's going on. We process it through our bodies, and a huge part of that is honoring what we feel so that it can come in, we can feel it, and it's like the weather, right? It can move through. But if it's coming in and we're like, nope, that's not real, oh, nope, I'm sure it's just me, so I'm gonna, this doesn't just go away. It doesn't just change your reality. We're not magicians. So all it really does is keep this stuck, fix it, change it, dress it up, but it doesn't change. And so here's the other sign. If you're minimizing before you even feel a feeling, and yet this thing kind of keeps popping back up, this pattern keeps emerging, and you're like, wait a second, this thing is really wanting me to give it my attention, the chances are it deserves it. It needs your attention. That there's something here that we are allowed to feel and experience and process. And when we're engaging in self-gaslighting, we can't trust ourselves, okay? Because again, gaslighting is effective. It doesn't just make you question the thing itself that happened, it makes you question everything. And so for me, what that looked like, every success that I had or traction I was getting in my life, I couldn't really own it. It was like I constantly felt this feeling like imposter syndrome, and I'm a fraud, or if they really knew me, they would know, or maybe it was a fluke that I got this, good thing in my life or whatever. It's hard to hold on to really anything that feels solid because it just constantly is crumbling. And part of being able to build self-trust is to trust that when this thing comes up, and it doesn't mean we have to do it alone. We can do it with support systems, with therapists, coaches, trauma-informed people, friends, people in our lives that we know can hold real space for the totality of who we are and what we're going through. That we can allow this thing that keeps showing up and we can go, oh, I see you. I trust that no matter what is here, if I can give it my attention, give it a witness, and allow, if it's a feeling, if it's a thought, if it's a memory, I'm going to let it come through my system. I'm going to see what it has to offer me, to show me, to teach me, to reflect back to me. And I'm going to trust that I will be able to digest what is mine to keep, and then maybe, perhaps even let go what is not meant for me. But it's a process, and we have to go through it in order to reap those benefits. You can't do it in advance. You can't do it like, oh yeah, I'm sure there's something in this for me, but I'm gonna figure it out by determining, I'm bad and wrong and you're all fine and I don't really have to address this mess. I'm gonna kind of sweep it back under the rug. One of the tricky things with gaslighting and self-gaslighting, like most things related to emotional abuse, are that they are invisible. Right? There's a lot of talk about the difference with relational trauma that's strictly emotional or psychological, that we don't have these physical bruises. There isn't this proof that goes, aha, see, I experienced it. Here's the evidence right here. And a lot of us are conditioned to look for evidence, this external evidence that says, oh yeah, that was abusive, right? So it can be very confusing, right? Because already the manipulation is designed to confuse you. And then it's all happening in your head. There's nothing or no one that's saying, wait a second, that's right there, what's happening. And now you're believing it, and now you're taking it on as you. That's abuse. And so it can be so tricky to start to untangle these things. I mean, believe me, I lived with unmetabolized trauma, not even knowing it was trauma, not even really knowing it was emotional abuse for 30 years. And in some ways, because the body prioritizes connection, but it also really prioritizes safety, the body needs to feel safe enough in order to feel the truth of some of these things. And it's why we talk about real safety through nervous system regulation, through coming into the present moment, through doing some of these other things I've talked about on this channel, bringing awareness to our trauma responses and things along those lines. So there needs to be a certain level of safety in order to even recognize some of these things, because the roots go so deep, and what you're having to really look at and see is often pretty painful. It was for me. It was 30 years of me minimizing my own experience and seeing how I contributed and perpetuated this experience of being really, really, truly stunted in complex PTSD, like a fixed position of it's just me and I'm broken and I'm the problem and I'm hypervigilant and I can't find any relief. I can't find any healing or relief because I don't even really see what the problem is. I'm still looking for some other name or diagnosis or something else that makes sense of it, and it doesn't, because it's not the real issue. The real issue was over here the whole time. And when I could finally see it and felt ready to unpack it, it had a chance, and I had a chance to let it start to move through like a weather pattern that I'm not holding so tightly. That's part of the hypervigilance. It's still here. It's still here. Well, it was still here. It was happening now because it was happening now. It was like a knot in my body that I no longer have to live with every day. In part by going back to the little girl who always knew this isn't right. Something is really wrong here. And I can trust her. And I can give her a voice. And that's a lot of what I'm doing on this channel, on Instagram, in my book, Believing Me. I'm going back and I'm saying, you know what? I lived for a very long time in a way, abandoning that fight response, that part of me that was willing to be in conflict if it meant that I was showing up for myself, and who had a voice and who wanted to advocate for herself, and it really got snuffed out of me. So it's been a bit of a rescue mission to go back and say, you know what? 13-year-old self, 16-year-old self, I see you, I believe you, and it doesn't have to be this way. You do not have to carry these stories that were implanted in you for their benefit anymore, that I get to live my life. I have a mentor who once said to me, Ingrid, what would you do if you were putting yourself first in your own life? And it both terrified me and felt like the most interesting question I'd ever been asked in my entire life. Like, could I? No. And it happened just like that. Like, wow, what would it be like if I really could trust myself that deeply and put myself first in my own life? But everything about me on the inside was screaming, you are not allowed to do that. And so coming out of self-gaslighting is like a peeling away of the not allowed and going, well, what if, what if I could put myself first in my own life and begin to lean into almost a radical self-trust? Because it feels pretty radical if you haven't done it for 30 years. I don't think it is radical in the sense that these ideas are so radical and this is, outsized. I think the problem is that we took something that was outsized and we shrunk it down. And so when we're actually responding to the thing itself, it feels radical when we've been responding to it as though it was this. But we're not radical. What we went through was intense. And we're allowed to own our experiences, our own stories, and our own voices. And I'd love to hear how this topic resonates with you, of how maybe you experienced gaslighting and its impact, how it lands in your psyche, which is so compelling, because if it's my fault, I can fix it. I love to solve a problem. I love to feel like I have some control. And so we come by our ability to kind of latch onto this stuff pretty honestly. Not only if it's my problem, I can fix it, but that means that you're not so bad. You're not as bad as maybe it feels like you might be. If I can reduce that feeling, I get to feel a little more safe in the moment, especially if you're talking about a caregiver or even a partner or whoever it may be. It's like, it's pretty terrifying to be in the face of someone that is intentionally manipulating you. We don't want to see that in our world, right? So the blinders go on and we go, oh, I must be overreacting. So we come by these things so honestly, and yet it's keeping us stuck. So I would love to hear your experiences with sort of peeling back that covering up and minimization and taking too much responsibility and owning these things that were implanted in you that never belonged to you to begin with, and what it's been like to access more of this true self, your highest self, your real, authentic, living in reality self. and we will continue to have these conversations on this channel. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my memoir, Believing Me, where I go into this whole process in great detail for me personally. And I look forward to continuing our conversation. Thanks for being here.